Study Committee is threatening, saying that they're putting the league on notice. If the violent targeting continues unchecked, the league could face a DOJ or an EEOC crackdown for violating federal civil rights laws.
Stop and sit with that for a second. A federal civil rights crackdown over a basketball league. How do we get from a hard foul on a court in Indiana all the way to the Department of Justice? Hold on to that question, because the road there is stranger than anybody wants to admit.
Now, just like I told y'all yesterday, a few videos back, Stephen A. Smith gave us fair warning that this day was coming. Judgment Day for the WNBA over the treatment of Caitlin.
And here's the part people keep forgetting. This didn't come out of nowhere. Stephen A. Smith, one of the most watched voices in all of sports media, basically called his shot. He went on record and warned that a reckoning was coming for the WNBA over how it was treating its brightest star. And he reached for a phrase that stuck to the wall: Judgment Day. At the time, plenty of folks rolled their eyes and filed it under hype. Nobody is rolling their eyes now. When the loudest analyst in the country tells you a storm is on the way, and then the storm actually shows up with letters from Congress stapled to it, you stop calling it noise. You start asking a much sharper question. Why didn't the people running this league see the same thing coming? Or worse, did they see it and just decide to wait it out?
Well, Tiffany, I think this is one of the wonderful things about Caitlin's entire career, from playing high school basketball right here in the heart of the heartland, to what she's done with the University of Iowa. She has broken every NCAA Division I record in scoring for both men and women. And moving on to the Fever, she has nearly doubled the sales with the WNBA.
That's Congressman Zach Nunn of Iowa, and he is not padding the resume. Before Caitlin Clark ever pulled on a Fever jersey, she rewrote the entire record book at the University of Iowa. She became the all-time leading scorer in NCAA Division I basketball. And understand what that means. That's not the women's record. That is the record, passing the men too. Then she goes #1 overall, and the league that inherited her roughly doubled its business overnight. Television numbers that used to be an afterthought started pulling millions of viewers. Arenas that had spent years fighting for a decent crowd were suddenly moving thousands of extra tickets in every single city she walked into. Merchandise sold out. Games got moved to bigger buildings just to fit the demand. So when a sitting member of Congress stands up and calls her a once-in-a-generation player, that's not a starstruck fan talking. That is a flat description of the single most valuable asset this league has ever put on a floor. And that is exactly why what happens to her physically has stopped being a sports argument and turned into a national one.
But they also, feel affronted as well when they watch a player like Caitlin get violently fouled repeatedly, when they see her gouged in the eye or punched in the throat. This isn't something that Americans should want, or that the league should.
Gouged in the eye, punched in the throat. That is the language a lawmaker is now using on national television to describe how a professional athlete gets guarded. And whether you think that framing is fair or way overheated, you cannot pretend the clips don't exist. The whole country has watched Clark get knocked to the hardwood, shoved off the ball, caught with an elbow, over and over, on highlight reels pulling millions of views apiece. The reactions split the instant those clips hit. One camp sees a young star getting hunted and a league sitting on its hands. The other camp says, this is professional basketball. Rookies always get tested, and everybody's clutching pearls purely because the rookie in question is famous. Both of those takes have something real in them. But here's the piece I need you to slide into your back pocket for later, because it's the part that actually decides this whole thing. It was never really about any single foul. It's about what the league chose to do in the hours after them. Sit tight on that one, because we're coming back to it.
The majority of these flagrant fouls is on Caitlin Clark, bro. Like, the numbers shows it, everything shows it. Hell, we just seen Lexi Hall even get punched in the face.
Now this right here is where you have to be careful, because this is the claim that gets shouted the loudest and fact-checked the least. The argument is that the majority of the hardest fouls in the entire league are landing on one player. Is that literally true, down to the exact count? That part is genuinely disputed, and it depends heavily on how you're defining a flagrant versus a common foul versus a no call that should have been blown. What is not really in dispute is that Clark has absorbed a striking amount of contact, and that she's not the only one on that roster catching it. You heard the reference to Lexi Hull taking one to the face, so the honest version of this isn't every rough play in the WNBA is secretly aimed at Caitlin Clark. The honest version is that one specific team, carrying the most watched player the sport has ever had, has become the flashpoint for a much bigger and much older fight about how this league gets officiated. And targeted is a heavy word. Being the focus of a defense is not the same thing as somebody trying to hurt you. And a lot of this argument lives in the gap between those two ideas.
Yeah, I think it is helpful. I think anytime you have lawmakers now using their voice and using their platform, I think it is helpful just to bring continued awareness. What everybody is asking for, lawmakers, players, I think GMs, I think across the board, is the league to find that consistency with officiating. So I think it is important that people continue to use their voice, people continue to use their platform to advocate for change.
And notice what the former player actually says. That's Katie Douglas, a Fever alum, a WNBA All-Star in her own right. And she doesn't scream about conspiracies. She lands on a single word: consistency. She says the players want it, the general managers want it, the coaches want it. Everybody is asking the same thing, which is for the league to officiate the same situation the same way every time. That is the version of this story that actually survives contact with the evidence. Because you can argue about motive until you're blue in the face, but you cannot argue that a rule book enforced one way on Tuesday and a completely different way on Thursday breeds exactly this kind of chaos. And give Douglas credit. She doesn't torch the referees. She calls it one of the hardest jobs in all of sports, and she's right about that. But grace for a hard job is not the same as a free pass. Her entire point is that you can fully respect how brutal that job is, and still turn around and demand that it gets done better. Those two things are allowed to be true at the same time.
It's live time, but they've got to find a way, because it's Caitlin Clark definitely getting a lot of physicality, a lot of plays.
Do you think it's jealousy?
You know, I don't know that it's jealousy, but I do think that you know, she does have a target.
Yeah.
But I think that the league has to understand, if that is the case, that they do have to do a better job of
Katie.
Okay, here is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable, and where I need you to think instead of just react. When the anchor floats the word jealousy, watch how carefully Douglas steps around it. She will not sign her name to it. She'll allow that maybe there's a target on Clark, but she specifically backs off calling it jealousy. That hesitation is not an accident, and it matters, because there is a much hotter version of this argument out there in the wild. The one that says the physical play is really about race. That is the accusation that instantly converts a sports story into a full-blown culture war, and it's worth being dead straight about where it's coming from. The people closest to the game, the actual players in these very clips, are mostly not making that claim. They are talking about whistles and rules and consistency. The racial framing is largely coming from the outside, from commentators, from talk shows, and now from politicians. And it is fiercely contested from every direction. You are allowed to believe Clark is getting a raw deal without also claiming you know what's in another human being's heart. Hold both of those thoughts at once. It's a lot harder than just picking a jersey to wear, but it's a whole lot closer to the truth.
Performing better. We just can all be better. And so we've asked three basic questions. One, how are you dealing with violence on the court? Two, what are you doing to hold violence accountable? And three, how are you holding threats both online and off the court accountable to help protect?
So now watch this thing actually escalate. These aren't anonymous fans in a comment section anymore. These are members of Congress sending formal, written questions to a private sports league. How are you handling violence on the court? What are you doing to hold that violence accountable? And what about the threats these players are getting, both online and off the floor? And this is the exact fork in the road where you have to decide what it is you're even looking at, because there are two completely reasonable ways to read it, and they cannot both be the whole story. Read 1. This is legitimate oversight. A wildly popular public figure is getting hurt. Millions of fans are furious, and elected officials are doing the thing elected officials do, which is apply public pressure until somebody responds. Read 2. This is a private basketball league. Officiating has never been a federal matter, and lawmakers sprinting to attach their name to the most viral sports story in the country looks an awful lot like politicians chasing a hot camera. And I'm going to be honest with you, it is almost certainly a little of both. The trap, the thing that gets people played, is pretending it's cleanly one or the other.
Our players. Look, the league has made billions of dollars off of Caitlin and others in the WNBA. They've done a great job franchising her. They've done a pretty poor job protecting her and other players. In this alone, we have seen Caitlin have 5 hard fouls called after the fact, 3 of those after the game was already over. This has got to change, and the league needs to do better.
But this is the number that makes the entire thing impossible to wave away. Billions. That is the scale of money and attention that Clark and this whole generation of players have poured into a league that used to fight just to get its games broadcast at all. And then comes the detail that should genuinely stop you cold. The reference to 5 hard fouls getting reviewed and upgraded after the fact. 3 of them after the final buzzer, after the game was already in the books. Sit with what that actually means. If a foul was clean, nobody drives back to the office the next day to reclassify it. Upgrading a call after the game is over is the league, in its own quiet way, admitting the officials on the floor got it wrong in real time. Do that once, and it's a human mistake, the kind every sport lives with. Do it repeatedly, around the same player, and you have personally handed every critic, the fair ones and the unfair ones alike, a signed confession that the officiating is a step behind the game. And it forces a question the league really does not want asked out loud. If you're quietly correcting this many calls on paper, why is it so hard to get them right in the moment, on the court, when it's the only time getting it right actually protects somebody? That's not a fan theory anymore. That is the league's own paperwork testifying against it.
Point, does Kathy Engelbert's handling of this, or lack of handling of this, become a referendum on her leadership of the WNBA and whether that leadership should continue?
That's a great question. Dan, I think all she has to do is respond to the letter and make it an open letter and say, you know what, we're hearing you guys loud and clear.
Which drags this whole thing right up to the one person most fans couldn't have named a year ago. That's veteran broadcaster Dan Dakich's show. And the question sitting on the table is blunt. Does the commissioner's handling of this, or her lack of handling of it, become a referendum on whether she should even keep the job? And here's the fair part nobody says. Kathy Engelbert has actually presided over the single biggest growth spurt in the history of women's professional basketball. New expansion teams, record media rights deals, attendance figures that would have sounded like pure fantasy a decade ago. By almost every business measure you could name, her tenure has been a genuine success. But leadership doesn't get graded when everything's going smoothly. It gets graded in exactly a moment like this one, when the biggest star your league has ever produced is standing on the floor holding her own eye, and the single loudest sound coming out of the league office is silence. Growth is what built this enormous spotlight. And now that very same spotlight has swung around and pointed itself straight back at the front office, asking a far harder question than any revenue chart on earth can answer.
We're going to take every action needed, whether it's with our referees, whether it's with our coaches and the players, and be sure that we run our league professionally, but also, to where it's still very competitive on the court. I mean, we all love competitive basketball. I mean, the games where it even gets physical, that's fine, as long as it doesn't become hostile. And so if she would write a letter like that, take ownership, take responsibility, that's what we're...
And here is the part that should honestly frustrate you, because the way out of this is not complicated. Listen to what they are actually asking for. Not a lawsuit, not a firing, not some groveling public apology tour. They are describing a letter, an acknowledgement. We hear you loud and clear. We're going to look at our referees, our coaches, and our players, and we're going to protect people while keeping the game competitive. That's it. That is a shockingly low bar to clear. Any functional organization staring down a firestorm this size responds to it. Says something, does something visible, shows its own customers that it's actually listening, which flips the entire question on its head. It stops being "why is everybody so angry?" and becomes something far more damning. Why has a league this successful found it so impossibly hard to simply say the words, "We hear you, we're on it"? Because every additional day of silence does not calm this down. It does the opposite. Every day of silence is precisely what convinced a group of congressmen there was a vacuum sitting there, wide open, worth stepping into. Silence didn't shrink this story. Silence is the thing that grew it.
I mean, Caitlin Clark, she's the one that's been targeted. This is an easy one to say, hey, we're going to make sure we clean this up. But every player in the league needs to feel like they're going to be safe when they go out on the court, and there's not going to be some sort of personal vendetta taken out against one particular player or another. Right now, the Indiana Fever, I have a feeling they're feeling a little targeted.
And this is the line that finally cuts clean through all the noise. So do not let it slide right past you. This was never actually only about Caitlin Clark. Listen to the real standard being set here. Every player on that floor should feel safe. Not just the famous one, every single one of them. And that quietly reframes this entire fight in a way that's actually fair to everybody standing inside it. Because if you make this exclusively about protecting the sport's biggest cash cow, you hand the cynics the easiest shot in the world. Oh, so the rules only matter when the marketable star is the one on the ground. But if the real principle is that the same protection and the same consistent whistle apply to the last player on the bench just as much as they apply to the #1 overall pick, then suddenly this is not special treatment at all. It's a floor that everybody gets to stand on. That is the version of this movement that cannot be dismissed as marketing. That's the version that's about the league that gets built next, not just the one player who happens to be famous right now. And that is the whole ball game, because the thing that actually determines how this ends is not the fouls, and it isn't even Congress. It comes down to one choice: whether the people running this league treat this as a crisis to survive and wait out, or a warning they actually decide to learn from.
So you guys can watch that full interview on Dan Dockett's channel. But one thing I will say is this thing is getting real, and it's definitely looking spooky. Get down in the comment section right now and let me know your thoughts about this. Keep them bells on, and until next time, man, shake the damn haters off.
So here is where I throw it to you, and I actually want you to plant a flag in the comments. Do you think all of this pressure, the lawmakers, the letters, the fury pouring out online, is what finally forces the WNBA to fix its officiating and protect its players for real? Or do you think it's political theater riding the biggest name in sports, and the second these cameras swing somewhere else, absolutely nothing changes? There is no fence to sit on here. Tell me which one you actually believe, and tell me why. If you made it this deep into the video, you already know the drill. Tap that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss where this goes next, because trust me, this is nowhere near finished. Drop your take down below. I'm out.